Joe Wadakethalakal.
No, no.
I pronounced it wrong. I had it right? Joe Wadakethalakal.
Nope.
Fuck.
Wadakethalakal.
Joe Wadakethalakal.
Perfect. You forgot the K's.
Wadakethalakal. That's a hard name. Where does it come from?
It comes from Kerala, which is, southern India. It's like the southernmost tip of the triangle,
That's
if you will.
what I know about Indian names. The more north you get, the shorter your name comes in, like a Gupta.
It's actually the name of my dad's house.
Oh.
So if you go to my dad's house, on the gate, it says Wadakethalakal. And so the address is Wadakethalakal House, which is pretty cool. And yeah, so everyone in that family has that name, basically.
You have quite the history. You're like the entrepreneur of entrepreneurs because you didn't grow up in India.
No. So, so my dad actually moved to Indonesia before I was born, and my parents were living in Mumbai, and my mom was pregnant with me. And so my dad sort of went to Indonesia to scope things out, and then basically was like, okay, all clear, right? And then
Indonesia sounds like a place.
Yeah, Indonesia is
and
real.
This wasn't Bali.
This is not Bali. This is Jakarta.
Okay.
And then so my mom, delivers me, obviously, and then 30 days after, I'm like fit to fly, and then I get on a plane and I'm in Jakarta.
Boom.
So Jakarta, it's weird. It's really hard for me to kind of define where I'm from because obviously I have an Indian passport.
Yeah.
And I feel Indian as well, but of course I feel very Indonesian. I feel American, candidly, because
Singaporean.
Yeah. So it's weird.
Yeah, you're an entrepreneur.
I guess.
So tell me about we're gonna talk about you're the CEO and founder of PVX Partner. Before that, you were the president of MPL.
Yeah.
What does MPL stand for? It's a skill gaming company. It had a fun name.
Yeah, Mobile Premier League.
Mobile Premier League, exactly.
Yeah.
So you were the president of that. You ran through the IPO for that company, kind of.
We didn't list. We're not listed.
You're not listed?
No, we're not listed.
I thought it was publicly listed.
No. Hopefully soon. I mean, who knows? But
yeah.
It'll list eventually. I'm fairly confident of that. But it's a private company.
All right. Well, let's take on a journey and let's get to PVX. But let's start from Joe Wadakethalakal in Jakarta.
Yes.
Well, what was your childhood like?
My childhood was amazing. I mean, I had a pretty good childhood. My mom was an entrepreneur, or is an entrepreneur, actually.
I remember that.
So, obviously for a while it was, sort of like my dad was a GM at a factory, and then my mom also was like working for another company. And then I think things started to get really interesting when my mom started her first company at the age of 7, right? When I was at the age of 7, sorry, not obviously when she was not at the age of 7.
Damn. Keep up with that.
And so, it was really cool because after school, I would go to the office, right? That's where I would hang out with my parents. I'm an only child, so I didn't have any siblings. So I'd go straight from the school to the office, and then my mom would make me do random things. I helped build their first website, and I would sit in on random calls, and she would ask my opinions on random things. That's sort of just being a fly on the wall and absorbing things. And I think that's when I sort of got it planted in my head that oh, great, one day I'm going to run this business, and I went to an international school where, a lot of people were really transient. And so, people would come in and you'd have your heart broken every 2 years, right? Because you'd become best friends with somebody and then they'd leave. And you're like, fuck, right?
Write me a letter in Uganda because that's where my family's from next.
And it was really sad, actually, for me. Because I would be close to people, and then I remember I would start crying because I'm in 5th grade and my best friends have all left, right? So eventually over time, basically what happens is you, if you're in that school, I was basically all the way till graduation, you end up finding a clique of people that are the constants, right? And one theme was that all of them were basically entrepreneurial, kids who came from entrepreneurial families as well. So those guys are the ones who actually had roots in Jakarta. So they didn't leave. They didn't, they were staying there. And so they all became my best friends. And so growing up, I would like go to their houses and obviously spend a lot of time with their parents. And like, they'd be like adoptive parents to me, and they're all entrepreneurs. So I was very fixed from an early age that, yes, I'm going to eventually become a founder. I wanted to be a founder.
Yeah, it felt normal.
It felt very normal. And it didn't feel like a big risk, you know? So obviously graduated high school, went to college in California, and then my mom sells her company. And I'm like, oh, fuck, like there goes my job. Because the plan was like,
now you have to build your own.
Figure something out, right? So I decided to go into banking, and I was a banker, or I was not a banker. I was an analyst at JP Morgan in the TMT group in New York. So I did that for about 2 years, and then I joined a really cool private equity fund called ZM Capital, or ZMC, which is actually founded by Strauss, who's the CEO of Take-Two. And that was really cool because we got a lot of exposure to the gaming business. So ZMC also, had had done a deal with Take-Two. Basically, ZMC was running Take-Two as well. Right, so a lot of the management team at Take-Two were also partners at ZMC.
Very cool.
So got to know those guys really, really well, and then obviously doing TMT like buyouts. That was an amazing experience. Those are great guys. Have a great relationship with all of them to this day. But I sort of felt that investing is a lot of fun. It's very intellectually satisfying. But to me, it still felt like a simulation of the real thing. And I wanted to get closer to the source. And the other thing I also realized is that past a certain point, just making money was not a motivator for me. Obviously, I think if you do a good job in the investing world, it can be a very lucrative career, and you can make a great amount of money. But I think unless you're doing something on the investing side that's truly innovative and entrepreneurial, then it's hard to sort of make in my opinion, it's hard to make like a huge impact or a huge dent, Yeah. And I was more interested in bringing something new than just making money. So basically after, 2.5, 3 years, I decided to move back to Indonesia. Because at that point I was like, all right, either go to business school, try stay in PE, or, maybe go try work for a hedge fund. But I was like, let me just leave New York and go back to Jakarta.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had this hypothesis that, given the experience I had been lucky to accumulate, that would give me a comparative advantage in a market like Indonesia, which I think is true to an extent. But if I had to do it again, I think, I wouldn't recommend starting a business in Indonesia necessarily. Like, I'm not sure that's the right move.
Why?
It's just like, it's just ultimately market size. Yeah. So the benefits that you get from having a better network are not as valuable in a small market, right? So honestly, today, if you said, all right, you're going to be dropped like, spawned in any market, right? And you have some startup capital. Where do you want to start? And for me, it would be a market like the US or China or India, right? These are like, those are the markets to play in because the markets are just so big.
Yeah.
And that is more important than having a great network, in my opinion, right? And so I think hindsight's 20/20, but
Attention app and game developers, are you ready to unlock the secrets behind the world's top performing apps and games? With Sensor Tower, you get the ultimate competitive edge, whether it's breaking into new markets, fine-tuning your UA strategies, or boosting monetization. Dive into data like never before, track global trends across app stores, analyze market-leading in-app purchase and in-app ad strategies, and benchmark your performance with real-time insight. The best part, Sensor Tower doesn't just deliver data, it helps you turn it into action. With intuitive tools and expert analysis, it's everything you need to make smarter, faster decisions. Thousands of app and game studios, from indie creators to global giants, trust Sensor Tower to help them win. So why not you? Start your free trial today at sensortower.com. That is sensortower.com. Big in terms of like internal markets in those countries are big enough to sustain the growth of your company.
Just the market size, the market size, the TAM available, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want to build a great website, let's say, which I, my second company was.
I've been doing it since you were a child, as a child labor.
Like, if you build a publisher, right? Like, you will be the biggest publisher in Indonesia if you're generating like 30, 40 million of revenue. Okay, you're like huge. Okay, in the U.S., you're probably like number 73. You know what I mean? And that sounds bad, but it's actually really good because you can still build something and like you don't have to crush it and still have a decent outcome. Whereas like, number 73 in Indonesia is you're generating $1 million a year max, right? Or maybe 500K a year. Like it's not meaningful, right?
Yeah.
And so that I think is something that I didn't appreciate and understand.
Mm-hmm.
Where sure, I had access, I was able to meet investors, I was able to get the meetings, I was able to build a business, but ultimately it's not interesting if the business is not big enough. And I actually think the benefits of having such a great venture ecosystem in places like, SF and even London and places like that, it's real, I think even versus a place like Singapore where I'm today, which is relatively good. I don't think it holds a candle to, some of the Western markets out there.
Access to capital, access to human resources, access to clients.
Access to market.
Access to market.
That to me is the biggest thing, right? Access to market.
Yeah.
So anyways, I moved back to Indonesia. I became like a consultant initially. So I was like working with a bunch of different companies to help them start up in Indonesia. So they were like, oh, you speak Western business and you speak Indonesian business. We think it's a great market. Like,
what's the language they speak in Indonesia?
Indonesian.
Indonesian?
Yeah, it's called Bahasa Indonesia. Huh. So, which just means Indonesian language, but you just say Bahasa. Basically, that means that's like.
I've only been to Bali.
Bali's great, but there's so much more to Indo.
Yeah.
It's the biggest archipelago in the world.
Really?
Yes, it's like 18,000 islands. It's as wide as the U.S.
Yeah. Like
from coast to coast.
Wow.
It takes you like 7 hours to get from one end to the other.
Of Indonesia?
Yes, it's huge. It's like like dark matter. It's like people like it's just like it's like big, but no one can see it for some reason.
Yeah, it's like big in plain sight.
Yeah, it's like as big as the U.S. right in population. Also, it's like almost 300 million people. It's a huge market, and it's a market a lot of people ignore.
Yeah.
But a lot of the
overlook.
Yeah.
Maybe better.
Yeah, sure. Overlook, ignore, whatever. I mean, whatever's the politically correct term for it. But it's a market that not a lot of people, for whatever reason, get excited about.
Sorry, I got you on a sidetrack. You were in Indonesia being a consultant, helping other companies to land in Indonesia.
Yes. And I realized that business wasn't really scalable. Mm-hmm. And so I started to pivot and I said, okay, what part of this is scalable? And it's basically, the company formation part and the payroll processing part and basically all the parts I didn't want to do were really scalable. So I pivoted the business there and I asked my mom to come and help me out. And so she basically came out of retirement and took over that business. And she's been scaling it over the last 10 years. She's done a phenomenal. Yeah, shout out to mom. Honestly, like it's a great lifestyle business. It's bought me a lot of freedom, candidly. It's going to be a good outcome for all of us. But anyways, that was the first company, and then I decided to start a publisher. And raised a bit of money for that. And basically the idea is very simple. It was like a BuzzFeed clone. That was interesting. That was like, I would say my first sort of like real startup. It was like more kind of scaled startup experience, right? Because that business had so much pull from the audience, and we became still are, I think they still are one of the largest websites in the country. We were like top 5 media website in the entire country.
Nice.
We were doing like 30-40 million monthly uniques, 300-400 million page views. Like it was an insane business, but it taught me very quickly, like, it's not about users, it's about business model. And we can do a whole separate podcast on the economics of publishing, but I realized at that time that, if you're selling your ad impressions programmatically, the system's sort of rigged where, right, I'm making, let's say, $100,000 on 1 million impressions. But when you go from 1 million to 2 million, you think, oh, I should be making at least 200,000 or say 180. But like now you're making 120, Suddenly like pricing adjusts. So it's very hard to scale. So, and then obviously those are, so I think the business model is different today because you have AI. So maybe with like AI content-led generation, the economics change. But at that point, like we had 100 people.
Wow.
Right. And like we had, 60, 70 of them were like basically content creators. Like I had content farms in tier 2, tier 3 cities in Indonesia creating content in Indonesian, right? To drive up traffic. But you couldn't really monetize the traffic well, where it couldn't really scale. And so that entire business became a B2B business, actually, where it's like you're selling to agencies, you're selling to brands, you're being like, hey, we're doing events, right? Or you're saying, hey, like do a whole kind of website takeover and pay $1 million or $2 million for that takeover for the year. And that's fine. That's actually fairly high margin, but it's very sales led and it's non-recurring.
Exactly, not
right?
predictable.
It's non-recurring. And that sucks because if you're like, hey, I've just worked so hard, I've gotten to say $5 million of revenue. Now when you go, you need to show growth. We were not VC backed, but we were like institutionally backed, right? So we had like people who were taking a venture bets on us. And so you're like, all right, I need to go 5 to 7. But when you go to 7, you need to win back the 5 and then you need to add 2.
So you need to create more content, more this, more that in order to get more space for sale. And it's not scalable.
Very hard to scale that business. And so I got very lucky. We had interest from another acquirer, like sort of the News Corp of Indonesia, if you will. Actually, they wanted to acquire my major shareholder, which was another website sort of conglomerate, and so they acquired them, and then they took us out. That was 2018. And that was great. I say it was a great PR exit for me because, like, good outcomes for our shareholders. Everyone made money except me, basically.
Oh, that's
that's how it is.
No comments.
Yeah. So, but it's fine. I mean, it was a good outcome, I think, generally, and
good learning experience.
Amazing learning experience. I was, I was like 28, right, 29, so it was like pretty amazing at that point. Obviously, I had the first business, which is still kind of nicely chugging along, and then I met Sai from MPL.
Yes.
And we got introduced through a mutual investor friend. They had actually, I met him in like October. They had just incorporated in like September, started working on the company, I think in like June, but had amazing traction. And I just saw this hockey stick growth. And I was like, all right, like I got to find a way to work with this business.
I got excited by the hockey stick.
I got super excited. And you know what I got really excited about is that I saw a clear role for someone like me in that business because it was such a, like ultimately running a website, in my opinion, is not, and not to take away from anyone else who's running a website, but I don't think it's truly that tech-led. It's much more content-led.
Yeah.
Right? It's not really tech-led.
I have a website. I know.
Yeah. So, whereas a gaming business is truly tech-led. Yeah. And I think what I saw is that I had a clear gap where, at this point I had a solid kind of footing and grounding in finance. I knew how to run businesses. I'd run a 100% 100-person company. But I really I didn't know anything about tech. And if I wanted to be, a tech founder or a tech CEO eventually, then I really had to know how to build and run a tech business. And, Sai is like an incredibly strong product visionary type. And his co-founder Shub is an amazing sort of engineering type. And I was like, great. Like, no matter what happens here, like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, luckily at that point,
Kick-ass live ops need kick-ass tools. That's where Heroic Labs comes in. They just released a massive update to their Satori live ops platform. And having done my research, I can say with confidence that it's second to none. In a single product, you get everything you need, including event capture, player segmentation, feature flags, remote configuration, A/B testing, experimentation, live events calendar, messaging, retention graphing, analytics, and so much more. If you're serious about running live services in a game, get serious about the tools you use. Connect with Heroic Labs and make some serious cheese with your live ops.
It didn't matter to me even if the company imploded in 2 years. Obviously, I didn't want that to happen, but I was like, I'm going to learn so much from these guys that it's fine. Like, I'll learn from these guys for 2 years, and then I'll go do something else. That was the initial.
And the fact that mom was running the consulting business, and you had the
corporate services turned into corporate
service business. In Indonesia, that gave you certain type of a cushioning to take risks.
Yes, exactly.
Which is really important with any kind of a startup, because if you don't have that cushioning and you've passed you're 28, 29, you're like, dude, do you have an apartment? Do you have a wife? Like you need to, like your buddies are all out of MBA. They already bought their second homes. Like you can't.
Oh, and man, like at that point, like the looking around the corner thing is real, right? Because at that point, honestly, like, I mean, we're sort of glossing over the details here, but like things were really rough, for me from like 2014 to 2018. I landed in a pretty happy place.
Yeah.
But, there was a long time where like, obviously at that point, I had a kid on the way. My dad had passed away during that time. The business like went through a lot of turbulence. There were times when I was like, man, like I'm going to ask my mom to like sell our house, like to just cover my bills. Like it was really rough,
and that's the thing.
That's like, the journey though.
Yeah, but we gloss over it oftentimes when we go through like almost like a LinkedIn, this job, that job, but there's no details of how hard, because as an entrepreneur, it is insanely hard what you go through.
It's insanely hard, man. It's insanely hard. I mean, like I also did a very stupid thing of trying to start multiple businesses at the same time. I started a live events business on the side, which almost took me under. I was trying to run 2 other businesses, and I was helping my first business. I took on a whole bunch of debt, right?
A lot of hubris.
Yeah, a lot of. But I needed the lesson in humility, to be honest. And the reality is like you don't learn any lessons. Like they don't come. Like it's not like you can just, eat a power up and then suddenly like, oh, I've now become mature. You have to go through the shit.
Unless you have excellent mentors. That's I've seen some founders who are like first time founders go into the billion sphere.
Yeah.
And they just have phenomenal mentors.
But it doesn't matter how phenomenal your mentors are if you don't listen to them.
Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
And I think ultimately.
And not just have phenomenal mentors. Of course, they're incredibly capable and whatnot, but they also listen to their mentors.
Yeah, and look, I think ridiculous startup success takes an incredible amount of effort and dedication and talent. Like not taking anything away from that. But it's also timing, right?
Yes, 100%.
It's also timing, because you can have the best fucking idea or the best concept, and if the market is not there, it doesn't matter, right? And I've seen this personally in some cases where, you do everything right and nothing's happening for 6 years. And then suddenly the market catches up with what you saw. And then the business hockey sticks, right? But then everyone only sees that part. They didn't see the fact that you're living on like $3,000 a month for fucking 6 years.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing. And that's the reality. And so I think And I think it's I think getting a lot of success early is very dangerous because it's very easy to trick yourself into thinking that you're successful because of what you did.
And because you're better than others.
Yes.
Because they haven't been successful.
And very rarely, in my opinion, are you truly successful because of what you did. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, I mean, we can go into this on MPL later when we talk about skill and chance. You can have a game that's 90% chance and 10% skill, and it's still a game of skill, right? Meaning that, like, if you play against someone and they have 0% skill, like, you're going to beat them. Like, there's going to be a lot of volatility in the outcomes.
9 out of 10.
Yeah, but if you kind of play that game 100 times, you're going to have a much better record than them. So there's skill involved, but there's so much volatility in outcomes from chance, right? So that's what I think about sort of the startup, success is that it's very dangerous to trick yourself into thinking, oh, I was successful because of me and not because of the market or the ecosystem, And so having that humility, I think, is really valuable, which is why I think there's a benefit if you've had a couple of startups where they've gone okay, but they haven't been rocket successes. You also understand, right?
I had Dennis Fong here on the podcast, and he sold 4 companies, like great outcomes.
Yeah.
And then he was on his 5th one, and he said the same thing. It's always fucking hard. Yes. Like, it's so hard. No matter, like, 5th time, like 4 exits, like Google bought his company. I think Take-Two bought his company, like these type of exits. And still, it's like starting from the beginning. Even though you think you know everything, with greatest founders, it's still incredibly hard.
And by definition, in a way, right? Because for you to do a really good startup, like that's going to create asymmetrical value, by definition, it needs to be contrarian, right? It needs to be contrarian and correct. And the correct thing is just timing. So basically, it's like where the future is headed. You have some sort of inside view onto where the future. You have a version of the future you think is going to be true.
Belief.
You're building for that version of the future.
Yes.
And by definition, if everyone thinks you're right, then you're probably like either you're going to have an average outcome, like it's probably not going to be a phenomenal outcome. It may still be okay. Yeah. But for you to have really crazy outcomes, you need everyone to disagree with you. Right.
Well, not everybody.
But most people should be like, huh? Like,
but so people were like, yeah, I understand, but
yes,
that's the best one. It's not like this is insane. Why are you doing this? But more like, here's some facts based on today's market.
Yes.
Why I don't think that's the best way to go.
Exactly.
And you're like, but I believe
the market's gonna go there.
Yeah, because you're like, you get what I'm doing, but you have a different perspective than it is. So it's not like ludicrous, but it's just not smart what other people would think.
Correct. I mean, look at gaming, right? You could have said in the early or mid 2000s, like, hey, mobile's going to be huge. That could be a view, and you could invest against that. And if you did that, you'd be a multi-billionaire. Yeah. At the same time, you could have taken the view that, hey, VR is going to be big, and you build against that, but you're 20 years too early or 30 years too early. Yeah. Both are correct. It's just, I mean, both we'll see on VR, but it's just a matter of timing.
Of course.
But going back to sort of psychology, I think for human beings, it's very painful because ultimately we are social animals. Whether this is just the way I view the world is like, ultimately I see the human being as an animal, right? And like we're primates, right? And primates care about status. They care about what other people. It's a survival skill. I mean, we've evolved that way. You need people to validate you and like you because that was a survival skill, right? Historically, at least.
Less over time.
But
especially when you're 20 and 30.
But that programming is in us. I think there's a natural programming in human beings that want social validation.
Of course.
Right? And I think it's an evolutionary thing because if people didn't like you, like, whatever, 50,000 years ago, your little tribe didn't like you, you died, right?
You cast it out.
Go
fish.
Yeah, and you died, right? So you needed, it was important to get people to like you.
Yeah.
So because we have that programming, I think this is what makes entrepreneurs really interesting creatures because you have to be comfortable with everyone disagreeing with you and everyone saying you're wrong, and you have to get that feedback find a way to not let it affect your psyche and still keep moving forward. And at the same time, convince another subset of people that you're actually correct.
Yeah.
It's a really, like, I think that is the hardest problem in entrepreneurship. It's actually not the financial risk. I think a lot of people over-index on the financial difficulty of, but it's taking risks. I actually think, for a lot of people, right? Like, people really overestimate the downside. Like, a lot of people actually have hidden safety nets, you know what I mean? But I think the thing that's really tough is hearing other people sort of tell you that you're
or
wrong.
Failing, or having that fear of failure is huge.
Is huge.
Where you're like, oh, that was a fucking waste of 5 years.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's like nothing came out of it. But yeah, I think that's even more. I've literally seen companies that have sold for billions, and the investors, like great investors, would say to these founders in the beginning, like, that's a fucking stupid idea.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that.
Yeah. And then, of course, like, the initial idea, they might be absolutely correct. The initial idea was fucking stupid. But over time, it just developed, and the founders.
Yeah. So I have a model about this, which is that, like, you know how bats like fly? Like, bats can't see, right?
Yeah.
But they use echolocation. So, like, they're blasting shit out. They're, like, seeing, and then they're getting feedback back. Like, that's like the early stage of a startup.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? You can't see.
Yeah.
Like, so you're flying blind, but you're blasting out information, and then you're getting feedback. And so, like,
adjusting based on that.
Yeah, you're getting the feedback, and then you're adjusting your direction. And the initial capital you raise is so you can find a viable flight path, right? And so that's that is the process. So, like, when people try something and it doesn't work, it's like, what do you expect? Like, what's the odds of the first thing you want to do working? It's the odds are infinitesimally, like, low. So it's about but it's again about receiving the feedback.
Yeah.
And is it true? Is it true feedback? Is it real? Or is it noise? Yeah. Okay, is it real? Then if it's real, let me adjust. And it requires a lot of humility.
Yeah.
And the paradox is, as a founder, you need to have extreme conviction in what you're doing, but at the same time, you need to always be willing to be wrong.
How do you balance that? Because these are two contradicting elements. So you're saying, and not you're saying, I've seen this, like, you have to have conviction in what you're doing. So meaning that when people doubt you, you still go forward. But at the same time, you have to be able to adjust to feedback that you're receiving from the outside. What's the basic way to do it? I've seen this happen in like, the two negative scenarios is the one where the founder does not adjust because they have such a strong conviction that it's turned into a religion. And then we just don't believe any contrarian. And then you have the other one where you have such a low conviction,
right? You feel
where you're just adjusting nonstop and wobbling and pivoting.
Yeah. So, look, it's not easy, and I don't think it's constant. I think a lot of this is based on your mood, and your temperament. But I think the thing that I try to do is, like, is this an opinion? Like, is this someone's opinion, right? And then if it's their opinion, okay, is this person believable or not, Like, if I hear from, like, we're doing something at the intersection of fintech and gaming, right?
We need to talk about that.
Yeah. But if I hear someone who is, let's say completely not in that space, let's say they were in the event space or whatever, and they're like, oh, this is ridiculous, then, it's fine.
Yeah, sure.
But I wouldn't rank that opinion as very high on believability, right? But I also feel like as a founder, sometimes you over-index on what investors are telling you, and I think this is the wrong place to get feedback from.
Exactly.
Step into the future of game monetization with Xsolla, the premier partner for game developers seeking to expand their reach and revenue. Xsolla provides a robust suite of tools designed to enhance user acquisition, manage subscriptions, and streamline payment solutions worldwide. Unlock new markets and maximize profitability through their customized, secure payment architecture and dedicated support team. Xsola, powering game developers to achieve global success.
We talked about when we were walking here, like there's I feel like, at least this is my own experience, is in the beginning of the founder journey, literally whatever VCs say to you, because you haven't really interacted with venture capitalists before and they tend to be your first investors.
Yeah.
And when you're speaking to them for the first time, you're like, I've accessed some knowledge, some hidden knowledge that I've never seen before. Like these guys seem to be on the ball nonstop. They have their hands on the pulse, and every information that they give, I should follow because I've never even been given. And then throughout the time, when you understand that a lot of the time the information proves to be wrong, you understand that they give their perspective and they get their data from very changing sources, and they're kind of on the the forefront of the hype. So that's why what they feel and what they see is very important. But again, what makes VC advice so powerful is because they themselves tend to be ex-founders. They're very convincing. They're very
Not always. Very few of them, actually, in my experience, are ex-founders.
Well, a lot of the ones that I interact with are ex-founders, and through that, there's a lot of respect towards them, and of course, and they're very knowledgeable, and they're very good at communicating, most of them, and so that's why you tend to also believe, because the way the message has been delivered and who it's delivered by.
Yes. So so just going back to your first question, obviously, when you get opinions, it's believability, but then it's also just real feedback. Like, what is real market feedback, right? Are people actually buying like when you pitch, what percentage moves to the next stage? Like, look at that objectively, right? And I'm not talking about VC pitches. I'm talking about pitching your product that you're trying to sell, or looking at the actual customer. Like that is truth, right? And so that's how you need to manage that balance between conviction and being willing to change, right? Going to your point about VCs, I put founder feedback, like feedback from people who've taken real risk, on a much higher pedestal, right? Regardless whether they're VCs or not. But I think it's like if someone has played a lot of Flight Simulator, they'll be able to talk like a pilot, act like a pilot. They'll be able to be a great pilot avatar, but you do not want them to fly your fucking plane. Okay? Like, the guy you want to fly your plane is the guy who's actually put 10,000 hours on a 777, not the guy who's done it on Flight Simulator.
Of course.
But if you meet them, you might not be able to tell the difference, by the way.
And you might even say that the one coming from Flight Simulator is more polished.
Maybe, right? So this is the thing. But ultimately, you need to actually get the feedback from someone who's done it. And by the way, I think when they give you feedback on your business model and stuff, maybe it's interesting, but it's more, I think, really valuable to get feedback from someone who's gone through the journey, knows the shit, understands, can empathize with you, knows where you're sitting, right?
And has done mistakes before.
And has and has done mistakes, and also knows that, this is a place where you're going to be hypersensitive and, you're hyper alert. You're in a state of vigilance because, you're like fighting for your survival, right? And so people who are in that state of vigilance are going to be like different creatures to deal with. Right?
The have committed mistakes before and having the confidence to speak about them, I think is really important, at least for me, because what I noticed is it was very hard to talk about your challenges, because when you're running a company, this is my experience, is like there are the product challenges, but those tend to be a little bit like, at least to me, they were smaller than the challenges of just building an organization and the teamwork and the soft parts. And then you're almost like, at least for me, I was almost like ashamed of having like conflicts with people, because it felt like these are not the issues that I should be even talking about. Where hindsight, I was like, this is the number one issue, is the misalignment with your founding team and the human part of it. And like the storming and forming part is actually the biggest challenge of a startup. But because the founders who I was talking to never talked about that part, it was more about like, growth, product, this type of stuff, then I also never brought it up. So it's important that the people are kind of real with the only later on they talked about like, yeah, actually we had the same thing and we had the co-founder problems and this and that, and this is why we structured these deals in this way because it limits these type of problems to occur. So anyways, being open about your own challenges or about your mistakes on both the product as well as the qualitative side or the soft side allows the founder to open up, and you create much better bonds.
Yeah, look, vulnerability is bonding is a function, in my opinion, of vulnerability or intense effort.
Mm-hmm.
And usually those two things go together, right? And so like you need to go through, this is why like I one way I get close to hacking, getting close to people is like doing intense exercise with people for a while. You will just naturally get close with them.
Yes.
Right? Because you're going through difficult things together. Or, I'm super close to, the other kids, or not kids now, all adults. But all the guys and girls in my analyst program at JP Morgan, like I'm still very close to them because it was like 2 years of insanity, right? It was 2 years of insanity, and we did it together. And so doing difficult things together with people is a great way to bond. I don't know how we got into this rabbit hole.
We were talking. I know I'm really bad at this. I just find most of the things that you say interesting, and then I end up like chasing them. And it's we're like the bat that takes too many signals.
Yeah,
it's all my fault. We were talking about the founder feedback.
Yeah, founder feedback,
and we ended up talking about this vulnerability part in terms of like how to make the founder feedback more, how would I say, acceptable to the founders and find that. But yeah, you were talking about opinion versus market feedback and so forth.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful. It's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
But we can let's circle back all the way because you are now at the beginning of MPL journey.
Oh, right. Okay.
You meet your two co-founders. One is technical, one is product.
Yes.
And together you embark on this journey, and you're just out of your 4-year stint with building your media company.
Yes.
So that on the LinkedIn looks like a nice 4-year journey. And then when you uncover it, you have emotional scars for days.
You should ask my wife.
And you almost sold your mama's house.
Yeah.
So that was a very tough journey, but you've wrapped it up. And now you're going towards tech.
Right. So to be clear, first of all, I'm not a founder at MPL, but I was one of the sort of founding employees, if you will. So one of the very early kind of team members. And, I think, so the two founders, Sai and Shub, Sai was super strong on product. Again, like I said, Shub was very, very, very strong on engineering. And I felt like there was this gap on the sort of business, finance, strategy side. And that's essentially how I plugged the gap, I guess. Yeah. I think the business had a lot of pull from the customers, right? And it was also a time of fairly easy money, in terms of kind of raising money to fund growth.
Which year that was?
This was 2018. 2018,
Ooh, yeah.
2018, 19. And we had a new angle, right? So MPL's whole angle was, hey, India has a long history of real money gaming, but there was never any platform that did that for casual games, right? So MPL's sort of vector, right, or sort of angle of attack, right, into that market was to say, hey, let's bring real money for casual games onto one platform, right? So instead of just doing game by game, it's one app. It's like a Roblox, right? And that was very, that had a lot of customer pull, right? And so that gave us that sort of J curve initially. It helped us to raise a lot of money behind that. And then that helped us kind of build a really, attractive business on top of it.
Plus growing Indian market. There was a lot of interest in India.
Yeah.
Moving from China, a lot of companies were already looking at India in that sense. Yeah.
And in a way, like, it's so true. Like success begets success, you know. Soros has this great sort of theory where like
he has many great theories.
Yeah, but this I forgot what it's called, reflexivism or something in the market, where he's basically like, you can invest. I mean, I'm butchering this, so you should look it up or clarify it in the notes or whatever later. But basically, it's
Google
like
Soros theories.
but I think the idea is something like, let's say if you want, let's say you want to build $1 billion company, right? Well, the way to build, like, one way is obviously you slowly increase your business, but another way to do it is like you just put $100 million into it, right? And then it's sort of, because you've put the 100 million, that then gets you all the people that can actually build $1 billion business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you sort of like live up to those expectations, right? I think it's not always true, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's some of that where, like, candidly, if we didn't raise money the way we did, the business could have plateaued or even gone down, because it was like we raised money, we leveraged like there was a lot of excitement. We used that excitement, raise a bunch of money. FOMO, right? And then the initial curve may have changed, but now we had a ton of money to figure it out. So that bought us time to figure something else out, and then we raised more money.
Yeah.
And then like that allowed us to do more. You know.
Talk to me about this. So this is like one of the topics that always creates a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
And jealousy even, is that some companies are just really good, or some companies and founders are really good at raising a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then there are companies who are like, no, your product has to show that you can raise. And then there are companies that are like, no, we will raise the money and then the product will come.
Yes. So I think all of these things can be true. I think the challenge with, raising money on great storytelling, which is basically what you're saying,
yes,
is that it can also create bad outcomes. I think, it's I mean, there's many public cases, right? Like WeWork and a whole bunch of these where like it can Theranos, right? Like you can have a lot of fraud in there as well.
NTX and what was
FTX. But at the same time, right? Like, I think there's a strategic way of thinking about fundraising, which I think we did very well at MPL, which is, it buys you a lot of momentum to get ahead of the pack, right? Like, for example, when we did our Series D is when we became like a close to unicorn. The moment that happened, that unlocked massive, and we did a meaningful secondary at that point as well. That unlocked a brand new talent pool for us, right? Being suddenly a unicorn means you're able to get a much better press coverage. You're able to like really hire the people that you want to hire. You're able to get into all those meetings.
You become prestigious.
It unlocks things for you.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Yeah. It's like the financing can unlock things, but ultimately if you don't have a strong business underlying it, then it's just a house of cards. Right? And so this is the challenge, is that you have to build a great business, but you also have to have a great narrative, and you can use financing very strategically. So that's I think you have to do both.
And this is where you come to place, because you're the two co-founders are good on product and tech.
Yeah.
But not on narrative and finances, right?
No, look, I mean,
if everybody's good at everything,
everyone's good.
But that's not their. But that was like your job.
But it's like, how did we divide, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, like Sai could definitely, like, he had he did the seed, he did the Series A, like he could do a lot. Like, he could do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, I can also do that.
Yeah.
And this now frees up a lot of his time to do other stuff.
So you don't have to switch your mind from. Because pitching and getting the deals is full time. It's more than full-time
job.
You have to be telling the story. Exactly. You have to be filming. You have to be playing. And while you're doing that, you're not doing the product.
Exactly. And I was on the road for like 3 years, just pitching the company. I did, for the Series D round, I did like, 70, 80 management meetings. For the Series E, I did like 100 management meetings, and we ended up getting like 3 investors at the end. Obviously, right 3 investors, but the thing is, like, there's a lot of stuff you have to plow through, there's no chance I would have been able to do that if I also had to be super involved on the day-to-day running of the business, right? And so I think what MPL did a really good job on is sort of dividing the responsibilities and be like, you do this, you do this, you do this. And we did it in a very low ego way where it was like, Sai was totally fine with me being front and center with all the investors. Like I was the main point of contact.
Yeah.
You
were the president at that point.
I was the president at that point.
Which is a lot from the, if you're a founder and you name somebody else president and they're the one talking about your company and essentially being the first point of contact for all the externals. Yeah. So Sai is a very confident man.
Yeah. Yeah. Very confident. Not a lot of founders can do that, I think, but we had we continue to have a great relationship, but I think we had a really good business partnership on that front. And it worked extremely well, right? It worked extremely well for us.
So you had the great story. You had a good business underlying that the combination brought you a lot of funding.
Yes.
And then a lot of funding brought you the status, and the status allowed you to bring good talent.
Good talent, which then helped the business.
And allowed you to be more strategic, where you didn't have to run it for the next round. It allowed you to build what you wanted to build.
Yeah. Yeah. Allowed us to do great M&A.
Yeah.
Like we bought, we did a couple of smaller deals, but then we bought one deal. We did one deal in Germany. We bought Game Duel.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so we bought Game Duel. Very transformational deal for us. Like really put us on the map in Europe. Business is doing great. We're able to really turn it around, that business. It's now one of the fastest growing segments of the company, I think. So we did, great M&A like that. And a lot of that was just access to capital, right? Yeah. Being able to, so I do think capital is it's not something a lot of founders think about, but it is a strategic advantage,
of course.
Because at the end of the day, like let's say if you think about a startup, and you have, there are two companies doing something similar, right? And there's, let's say, like 6 investors who really know that space, right? And you manage to get like 5 out of those 6 into one company. And maybe the other company is able to raise other funding too. But it's sort of this thing where like, this company's been able to raise more funding, right? Then the perception is better. So suddenly that company is able to hire better engineers, right? And then that company, as long as it executes, then maybe it creates more demand.
Yeah.
And then there's like more money coming in. And then this company is able to sell more. By the way, the other company can still win in this scenario. I've seen many cases where the company A in this point just squanders its lead, and I do firmly believe that raising too much money is a curse.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Because it basically what it does is it allows you, it gives you an excuse to not prioritize. Okay?
Do too many things at the same time.
Because you have too much money. Yeah. So it's like, let me do these 6 things. But the reality is,
acquire a couple more companies, the integration fucks you.
Correct. The reality is, in the first kind of 4 or 5 years of a business, it's the founders and the management team are the ones making things happen. And, we're not Elon Musk. You know what I mean? Like everyone likes to think that they can do that. We're not. You know what I mean?
There's
like,
only one.
The only one. And you can only do one thing really well at a time, actually. Yes. Right? And so, but when you only have $3 million, you're like, well, we can't take 6 bets.
Yeah.
So we have to do the work to figure out what's the best fucking bet. And then let's do that. But if you have 30 million, you're like, I'll do all. And then you do none of them well enough to win. So I've seen overcapitalization destroy companies as well. But I think if you can maintain that balance, then you can create this like reflexivism, where it's like, you raise money, that buys you more momentum. You actually capitalize on the momentum. Then you raise more. Then you can sort of break out and create momentum, right? Which is very important.
Fascinating. And then when did you leave MPL?
I formally left March of this year, but basically end of last year, I sort of, the company, was already at a very kind of solid, stable place. And it had been, over 5 years at that point. And I was just very hungry to,
start again. That's like your career.
Yeah.
You get to a comfortable place and you need to punish yourself.
Yeah. I honestly, I think I'm very curious as a person. And I think the best way to learn something is by doing, right? Building and doing, in my opinion, is the best way to actually figure something out and learn. And the business that we're in is very data led, right? So I'm like a huge data geek as well.
No shit. You have an Aura Ring, an Apple Watch, and Whoop strap.
Yeah.
That's a lot of data for one person.
Yeah. So I just love having access to data and like running my own queries and finding things out. Like for me, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a natural pull for me.
Yeah.
You know, I wish every event in the world was logged, right? Because then like you'd be able to figure anything out, right? I think that's fun.
But your latest company, so you leave MPL, you start PVX, and that's how we get connected.
Yes.
It has changed the way I look at reporting for games, because like I come from product background, 15 years, product management, studio, startup, but always on the product side, not that much on the marketing. Like I dabble. I'm on like a yellow belt in marketing. And then so I might understand a thing or two.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a case we're working on through Deconstructor of Fun with a medium-sized companies, like 5 billion downloads till date. So just in terms of the context.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to raise capital.
Yeah.
And we came to you.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, let's talk to both UA Finance. So PVX. Actually, tell about PVX first, and I'll explain.
Yeah. So, look, I sort of the seeds of PVX got planted in me when I was in MPL.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the thing is, everyone thinks gaming is a pure hit-based business, right? And it's a narrative where part of it is true, okay, where there is a hit-based element to it, but it's mainly a pre-mobile narrative.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a console narrative, right, and a PC narrative. But in mobile, the reality is, for a certain subset of companies, MPL is one of them, and because this is how we got inspired, is that our revenue is very SaaS-like, is incredibly predictable. Okay,
with user acquisition. Yes.
Yeah, and we were basically in the business of saying, okay, if I spend X million dollars, I can say with a 95% degree of accuracy, backed by real data, right, that I'm going to get this return over this many years, right? Or I'm going to get this range of return over this range of years, okay? And that is incredibly predictable. And so I was like, all right, if you have something predictable like this, why aren't you able to borrow against it? Okay? Like you should be able to borrow against that. Like this is not, why are we spending equity to acquire something that's very predictable?
Exactly.
And at that time, there wasn't a single bank who would do this with us. And I got to know the folks at General Catalyst that have the Customer Value Fund, and they kind of realized this, I think, initially with companies in some other sectors, and they were also kind of looking into gaming. And I was fascinated by their product, right? Because I was just like, holy shit, this is the right vehicle for growth. Like in a company, early stage, you have no fucking clue what you're going to build, okay? Then the stage after that, you start testing it, iterating the product, okay? But then the third stage is, okay, now you've iterated the product, you have something that works, now we just got to ramp UA.
Yeah, scale.
Why am I giving up 30% of my company to do that?
Yeah, Series A, let's go. We found a product market fit. We just need money to scale. Let me give majority of my company away now.
Exactly. Because it's like, hey, by the way, if you crush it, okay, the thing to me, and you know what? I wish accountants found a better way to account for cost of equity on the P&L. All right? Because then everyone would wake up and understand that this is fucking expensive.
Yes.
But the thing is, like, let's say you have, a company, you're at like 50 million, okay? And you raise $20 or $30, okay? So you've given up 40 to 60% of the business to scale up because you're like, we really have something here that works. And then let's say it does work, right? And that company becomes a $100 million EBITDA company, and you sell it for 10 times, for $1 billion, right? That 30 million you raised now has cost you're repaying it back at 400 million in like 8 years.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? But nobody thinks about it like that, right? And I understand why you take equity when you don't have something that's tested. But once you have something that's tested, you should have some sort of credit instrument. But the thing is, everyone is so nervous on taking credit. Like, credit has a bad reputation, I guess. Like, it's like taking a loan is a dirty word.
Yeah, it's expensive. That's what, because you don't have the cost for selling your own equity.
Yeah. Well, it is a cost.
It is a cost, but
you don't feel like, oh, that was my money.
Yeah.
You're not like...
So percentage went up. I'm not happy with my new percentage, but at least we have more money in the bank.
Exactly.
You gave away something that is almost like free.
Yes. So we, I think what was really novel about GC was they found a way to take downside risk on the cohorts and cap their upside. And I was like, holy shit, something like this needs to be customized for gaming. Right, because I think there's a lot more you can do on the gaming side, not just in obviously providing the financing, but then providing eventually the how to optimize your marketing mix, giving analytics to gaming companies, where you can actually look at LTV CAC by channel. You can actually look at, hey, where are all my high rollers coming from? Like my whales, which channels acquired my whales, right? An easy way to kind of forecast your revenue. Like there are all these other really valuable tools around how you manage your business from a financial perspective, how you think about your marketing spend, and then how you optimize your LTV that are also really important for these gaming companies. But there isn't anyone out there that's also taking skin in the game, right? So our idea was, let's give these companies capital to scale up UA. So we'll obviously diligence these companies. Given that we now get the data, because we need the data to kind of scale up UA, let's use the data that they're giving us to then help them to do even more with their business. And that to me just felt like such a complete no-brainer. And this is like a new type of, this type of financing instrument requires data. Yeah. It's not one where you just look at PDFs of financial statements. So by virtue of getting that live stream of data, you're able to provide these other services as well. And so that felt like a really compelling business, because now you're not only telling the customer, use this marketing mix and pay me 10% of your marketing spend. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, too bad, right? Now you're saying, hey, use this marketing mix. Only pay, by the way, I'm giving you the money to spend here. So our incentives are completely aligned. Yes. And if this doesn't recoup, I'm taking that risk with you. Yeah. Right. So.
And that was really interesting about the model. And that, because when I saw how you work, and on the flip side, you're like, okay, so you do UA financing. I've heard about UA financing so many times. Nothing new. Yeah. But so I, introduced the company your way, that company that I was talking about. And what impressed me, and not impress is the wrong word. What reset the way I look at product dashboards is the analysis that you guys came through. So they gave the data, and at that point, it was interesting because we were interacting with a bunch of big size funds in terms of getting a large equity infusion by giving away large capital infusion by giving away equity. Yeah. And then this was kind of like an option. Weird. Yeah. So let's also look at, because most of the UA financing that has been done is relatively small size. It will be like $1 million or $2 million a month. Yeah. Versus you basically said however much you need. We can go 10, 15, let's go. Yeah. So we can really scale up the game. So it was like, okay, let's see what these guys are about. But the way the report that you guys came up with. So you got all the data, the same data set of the company's portfolio that all the VC firms got as well. And you were the ones that came back with such a deep analytical understanding of how to scale, because you have the skin in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
So you need to understand. It's not like, we can give you this X, Y, just pay us this. Yeah. It was more like, we are taking a massive risk, so we need to do a really, really, really good analysis.
Yes.
And that was very much eye-opening for me. And so what I want to ask the question is, like, how did you come up with these models and like the reports that you do?
Yeah. So it's how I used to look at our business at MPL.
Oh, okay.
And it's how I used to look at the companies we would, try to buy.
I worked at game companies for 14 years. I've never seen these type of reports.
The thing is, like, I have I started in financial engineering, right? Like, so basically the background is like heavy in finance and then business and then tech, in that order.
Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of people go the other direction, where they start in tech and then they move towards finance. I started in finance and moved towards tech. And so that's just the way I thought about it. And yeah, we just took that exact same lens, right? And I think the other thing is that, like, also when we were running the MPL business, right? I mean, that business has great, like, returns on ad spend, and it's very high retention, right? So it's all about how much can you spend and how effective is the spend, and you're obsessing over that. So that's all I thought about. Like, at MPL, I was mainly thinking about capital allocation, right? So raising the money and where to spend it, and most of that was in UA. So these are all the things we had to build. I had to come up with when I was at MPL. So I just took that here, and I think one of the things that helps us when we talk to founders is that I've sat in that seat, and I've sat in that seat from inception to massive scale, like triple-digit millions scale, right? So I'm either at the level, in most cases, I'm at the level that I've been to the level that these companies all aspire to get to, and so because of that, I know what I wish I would have been able to see when I was at that stage, if that makes sense. And that's what we try to give back to the companies we work with, right? So that report, interestingly, it's our most popular product. Like, people come to us and, they may not be that serious about underwriting or
but you just get the due diligence on
but
your
they want
product.
us to DD them, and give them that report, which is great, we want to be very, like, we basically want to be, we are for game companies, okay? Like, we want to help game companies in every way we can. We want to start with the financing part. I think, we want to come up with fair financing solutions that not just support the top 1 percentile of games, right? But actually work for the whole gamut of game development companies out there. And then we want to support them on the LTV side, and we want to do that where we also have value at risk, because ultimately we think that is the winning model, right? Like, if you have a vendor who's saying, here's the product, if it doesn't work, don't pay me. Like, why would you say no to that?
Yeah.
You want to find ways to, like, I'm a very strong believer in massive long-term advantages to alignment of interests.
Yeah. Here's money, go spend our money. And if it doesn't pay back, you don't have to pay me anything.
Yeah, we take the risk with you.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That was the craziest thing when I heard it. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that this, especially in the post-IDFA world where people say targeting is so difficult, it's so difficult to run marketing. It's all the past where you were able to use the value optimization effectively. But you seem to be able to crush that.
Well, it's early days. We're working with 2 or 3 companies now, which we're very happy about, since we sort of came out of stealth, if you will, like in April, May. But yeah, the traction is great. Like, we do have a lot of interest so far, and we just have to keep innovating and keep trying to add value there.
What kind of companies do you work with?
Right. So we mainly work with companies that are sort of at, $200,000-300K a month in spends, all the way up to, say, $1 million a month in spends. And these are companies that have room to grow, right? So the main thing that we look at is, what is your incremental ROAS post payback, right? If you're a business that has, like, after payback, your cohorts or part of your cohorts stay for a long time, so you have strong kind of engagement retention.
Yeah, revenue retention.
Yeah, engagement retention actually more important for us. Revenue retention is good too, but fundamentally people forget, like, if you don't have users on the platform, then you can't monetize them.
Makes sense.
So what we really want to see are companies that, you'll have a small group of their users, anywhere from 2-3% if they're doing a lot of UA all the way up to say 10% that just don't really go away or sort of degrade at a very kind of gradual rate and will last for years, right?
Yeah.
And those guys are continuously spending. And so if you have a lot of that incremental ROAS, then basically what that gives you room to do is spend a lot more. Because even if your paybacks get stretched, it's fine. You're still going to have a lot of margin on top of that, right? But if you're a business that caps out at 110% ROAS, it's very tough for us to come in and finance you because we're going to take a lot of that upside ourselves, right?
Exactly.
And so it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
So basically you're looking at an LTV curve and an LTV curve that keeps on increasing, because if the LTV curves keeps on increasing, no matter what the velocity of increase is, it means that over time,
it's
like you can push back the payback time. It doesn't really matter because you can see that the players are staying and the players are paying and they don't have to.
Exactly.
And it's much better than those who kind of drop in the beginning a lot of money. And then you can see the curve kind of not grow really.
Right.
And then that means you can't really spend on it because you can extend the payback period to however long you want, and the amount will not be significantly more from this point on to like a year later.
Yeah. I think so that's the company profile for now.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, it's a first year.
It's a first year. And we think there's a lot of room to grow there. But we also understand that that's a fairly small segment of the market. The companies that have, that predictability are also at, 300, 400, 500K a month and want to like double or triple, right? But it's big enough. Like you can build a really attractive, solid business just on that. But we are also coming up with a product for companies at the very early stage, right? So where we say, hey, you've just done testing, you've spent like 10K a month for the last 3 months. We've actually come up with a product for those guys where we'll come in and, we're not going to put that much money. We'll maybe put like 50K, 60K. But like for that game dev, 50K, even if it's just 40, 50% of what their budget is for the month, that will extend their runway another year.
Yeah.
Right? It's a big thing for them. And we found a way where we can sort of manage our downside risk there. And it sort of then gives the game dev more time to prove out their concept to then go and raise their Series A.
Almost like soft launch funding.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you put your game in soft launch and your numbers might not be quite what the investors expect for you to raise a Series A, you can work with PVX to extend your runway so you don't have to spend your capital on user acquisition and through that increase the need to raise at a bad term.
Exactly. And then we can graduate them onto the core product, right? And then for the late stage guys, we're working on an acquisition financing product.
What's that?
So basically a way for them to realize a lot of the value in their cohorts today, and so that they can use that to go do something big and strategic, right? So imagine you're like a social casino company, right?
I imagine that every morning.
and you're not, those companies are not really growing that fast anymore. They're sort of...
No, they're EBITDA.
Yeah, very strong on EBITDA, right? But in terms of UA, they're not, there's no UA constraint for that business, right? They're literally spending as much as they possibly can. So going to that type of customer and saying, hey, let me fund part of your UA, they're like, okay, why? Like I don't need to spend any more. And the only reason they'd consider it is because if you can then fund 40% of their UA and that means they throw another $30, $40 million on their balance sheet, then they can build that up over a few years and then use that to do something strategic, right? But we sort of took that and said, okay, if the goal is to do something strategic now, right? Because people don't plan that well, just in general, right? No one's like, oh, I want to do a deal in 2027. Let me start prudently making sure I have cash on balance sheet for the deal that might come up in 2027. Like by definition, people just don't do that well. They're more like, holy shit, there's a deal coming up in 4 months. I need money now, right? And so a better way is for us to say, all right, look, you have these cohorts, they're acquired. Your existing cohorts are going to generate another $200 million over the next 4 or 5 years. Here, we're going to loan right now, give you the money against that. Here's $100 million right now on that future value. Now you can use that $100 million and go do a big M&A deal. right? And so that's a new sort of acquisition finance product that, and we haven't done it with anybody yet. But that's something that we're starting to talk to people about, because I think we have the right financial backers for that as well. And yeah, like I think so. We want to serve, game devs at every stage of the market, right? The mission of the company is to serve, consumer app owners, developers, founders. That's we want to serve them, right?
That's pretty cool. So if I have a EBITDA positive game,
doesn't even need to be EBITDA positive, right? It just needs to generate revenue.
Yeah, revenue generating game, and I can raise capital to expand my business through an acquisition, strategic acquisition, that essentially, adds 10, 20, 30% to my top line revenue, but I don't need to spend I would spend my capital on it, but I'm able to access that capital through loan rather than selling equity.
Yeah, I mean, anyways, you'd need to take debt anyway.
Yeah,
but you would need to look at taking debt from. Let me give you an example.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So let's say you want to buy this company. You think the company is inefficient, right? So the company generates $100 million of revenue, and it generates, let's say, 15 million of EBITDA, right? And there are these companies around, by the way. I've looked at them, and you have confidence. You're like, I can buy that company, and either through merging it with me or restructuring that team, I can turn that EBITDA from 15 to 40.
Play a game of a private equity.
Yeah, right? So you feel like you can do that.
Yes.
Now, when you go to lenders, okay, the lenders are going to say that company does 15 million of EBITDA. And let's say you offer that company, let's say you offer $100 million, okay? So about 6 times. Let's say you're offering 6 times EBITDA for that company. The lender says you're offering 6 times. I'm going to give you 3 times, 45 million. You have to put in 45 million of your equity.
Yeah.
Right? But with us, right, you could say, well, we know that 100 million of revenue, that's going to generate 300 million over the next 6 years. Here's 100 million now, right? We don't care about the EBITDA ratio.
Okay.
Right? It's like we know, because we're taking security on that revenue. And so now you get all the cash you need to buy that company. Of course, we'd still want you to put some equity, but you get the cash you need to buy that company. Then you can do what you need to do to fix up the EBITDA. That's the bet you're taking. I'm only taking a bet on the degradation of that $100 million bucks, which is a very safe bet for me, right? So you don't, because ideally the lender, the traditional lender should, if they believed you, they'd be like, oh, this company has $40 million of EBITDA, like I'll lend you 2 times, right? But they're never gonna, they're like, oh, okay, like sure, we don't trust it until we see it.
Yes.
And so for us, we just take that out of the equation. It's not relevant to us.
Yeah, because you're specific on this industry. So basically you're allowing somebody to become an aggregator.
I mean, we're trying to enable that.
Yeah. So I would acquire several mid-sized companies and become a big company by creating this approach of access to capital through my own growing revenue stream that I'm growing through aggregating. Interesting.
It's one thing you could do.
It would be pretty fast scaling.
Look, I mean,
if you're able to close the deals, of course, there's the ability to close the deal. There's ability to post acquisition integration. There's a ton of work that needs to go right. Plenty of things you can make mistakes on. You can grow too fast. All those elements, but nevertheless, nothing happens unless you have the access to capital.
100%. I mean, so this is more of a product to like strategics or folks who big companies who sort of want bigger checks. I think for this one, the minimum size we do is probably like the 20s, right? Like $20-30 million would be the right sort of initial check that we'd want to do there. Whereas with the other companies we're working with, we can start with like $2, $3, $4 million. It's fine.
Damn. And where's PVX now? So let's say you're under a year since starting. I know you're co-founder, Rez. So where are you right now?
Look, we're just focused on building the brand, right? I think explaining to people who we are, what we do. I think we're just trying to work with more gaming companies. And I think, that to me, I mean, like my first business was a B2B business, right? The corp services business is ultimately a B2B sales business. And I think my big realization there is that the best way to build that kind of business is by doing a great job for your customers.
Of course.
Right. And so, we just want to make sure we're delivering value to the folks that we work with. And then, they're telling their friends, right? They're telling, because the game community, as you know, is small, right? So they tell people, and that's how we're sort of building our book. I think we have a lot of ideas and we have a lot of ideas, a lot of different things we want to do. I think the vision keeps expanding. There is a big, ridiculous vision out there that we have, which is, we think we can sort of be the central nervous system of the gaming industry, right? We want to be plugged into like thousands of gaming companies, and we want to like
the access to capital without spending your equity.
Yeah, provide them capital, but also provide them intelligence. Like we want to empower them, right? Because I think if you then are able to do that, you can sort of become another path, right, on marketing. Another, like you can start to disrupt a lot of these other industries once you have access to these data feeds.
So one thing you said in the beginning is about when you were talking about building your media business is that it wasn't scalable.
Yeah.
Because you needed to, the deals and so forth. Is this scalable?
I think so. I have to believe it is. Yeah. We'll see what the feedback is from the market.
This is not a SaaS product.
This is not a SaaS product. I mean, it's the financing business is relatively sticky.
Yeah.
It's not as sticky as a true SaaS product, right? Because obviously once companies reach a certain scale, then they will churn. They don't need the financing anymore. But I think where we have a lot of comfort there is that there's a lot of creative destruction in the gaming space, right? And so a lot of companies are getting thousands of games are getting formed every year. And unfortunately, thousands of them are also dying. Like there's a lot of recycling here. And so we sort of want to be part of that life cycle loop, right? So yeah, I think the financing business is actually fairly sticky. And it is scalable, right? As long as you're able to meet the customers where they are, right? And not be super rigid about, I just need you to fit this box, right?
Are you then competing again with venture capitalists?
No, I think we're enabling venture capitalists. I think, where we are is if you're a VC, I mean, you want us to work with your companies because it limits your dilution, right?
If you're an investor in that company, but if you're in a VC that is trying to get into that company,
sure,
then
yeah, maybe. But the way that I see it is that look, if the founder really wants to bring in VC investor, they should, right? That's their prerogative.
Yeah.
But how do you've taken that equity capital. Yeah. Don't use that on something that's predictable. So go raise the round. Yeah. Go raise the round, but then get PVX in, or some sort of whatever. It doesn't have to be PVX, but think about non-dilutive financing to scale your UA.
No, it's 100%. And many of the companies even have, as I said, like I think we were talking this morning, the one company called me and asked, like, can I help them to get VC financing to grow their game? Yeah. Like 5 million or so.
Right.
I was like, why?
Yeah.
What's if that's the goal, then that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Just talk to UA financing first.
Yeah.
If there's nothing more than we just need money to grow the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think there's a lot of value in having strong VC partners.
Yeah.
Okay. But once you take their money, is the right place to put their money on UA? Yeah. No. I think, look, by the way, initially testing, sure, because it's experimental. But once you have something that works, don't use VC money to fund that, right? Go raise the VC money.
Yeah. Build your publishing
Build
arm.
Another business.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Build another arm. Like build a better product or iterate the product.
Yeah. But expand to horizontally or vertically.
Exactly. That's where I think we can coexist really nicely. And we're seeing that dynamic play out. In fact, a lot of our business is coming from VC introductions, right? Yeah. So those relationships are really, really important for us. We don't want to be competitive. A lot of people have come to us and said, why don't you do equity? Right?
Then you'd be a VC.
But then we'd be a VC. Yeah. And I think it screws up the incentives, right? Because I think ultimately you want to tell the company, right? hey, I'm not a shareholder in your competitor, right? Like you want to be Switzerland, you want to be neutral. So we're not going to do equity. We just want to focus on, we think there's tons of room of innovation in credit. We want to do that.
Well, I love that. Joe Wadakethalakal. I'm so proud. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Oh, close.
Fourth time right.
God damn it, so hard. I have an awesome name. I like what you're doing. Again, like I just want to like finalize with the part of you helping the game companies in the way you are, not only through the capital for them to deploy against growth without selling their equity, which is highly precious and the only thing that the founders really have, but also through the due diligence that you do on the companies. Like if there's a company who's still listening and or you have in your portfolio and you're trying to figure out how can we grow, whether they're old in the tooth portfolio or whether you have new games coming out, I really suggest reaching out to PVX. I've had tremendous, the company that I work with had tremendous success with getting your analysis, and they have been eye-opening. Where I was like, I thought I knew something, and I was like, God damn it. And now I'm like approaching it in a totally different way, the way I analyze it. So you know, you guys definitely know what you're doing when you're assessing your own risk before putting in your money. And that in that particular case, you actually said no for the company, and it was still so incredibly valuable that the no came in. Here's no, but here's why.
Yeah.
And we're able to see so many things to improve on that were outside on the product and actually inside the other.
But you know, that's the thing. For us, it's not like, you know, I know some VCs have this, like some of them, not all, but I've heard some VCs have a policy that they won't revisit their passes, right? Like it's like if you passed, you passed. Like they're not going to really look at it again. They won't spend time.
Weird.
Yeah. We're not like that at all, right? Like, so for us, it's like, we want to finance everyone.
Yeah.
Like, we would love to finance every single company.
Yeah.
So our approach is when we're giving them that feedback, it's like, no, but please come back in 6 months.
Yeah.
By the way, this is what we'd love to see. Like, we, by the way, have a couple of companies who've said, hey, can you access our data? Like we'll give you, can you pretend you're financing us? Just don't give us any money. We'll give you the feeds and then you tell us when we're ready. And actually we've plugged into a couple of these guys in the summer. Yeah. We're about to issue 3 new term sheets. Like I think Ritzky, my partner, co-founder, he called me this morning. He's like, we're going to issue 3 new term sheets because their cohorts have started to inflect. I was like, okay.
Because they got the data, now they know what to focus on.
Exactly.
And that's the way you deliver no is like there are certain VC funds that say no and they say exactly in that way. Yeah. I'll give a shout out to Makers Fund. Yeah. I remember before I had interactions with Makers Fund. Yeah. One of my friends, Anil Dasgupta, they went through one of their early rounds and they received unfortunately no from Makers. But he said the no was so good and so constructive that it was almost better than the yeses that they got because that allowed them to. And so he had this sort of a super positive. So he gave me a reference like, this is a great fund, even though they said no to him. So it was like, and that's the same. Like it's a value added no. 100%. It wasn't like, we're kind of like, it's like, no, here's exactly where you're at. And if these things get better, we're in.
People forget that all the time, but like, when you say no to somebody is when you can build your reputation. Yeah. Because like the people who are going to talk shit about you are the people who you made feel small or feel bad. Yeah. And, this is candidly one thing I think VCs do a terrible job at, a lot of VCs, right? But I think, when you say no to someone, if you say it with empathy, but also this is how you get to yes, then they have a great feeling, right? There's something constructive. There's real feedback.
And it has to be, by the way, real. You can't say, hey, if you guys could use like a marketer on your team, and then if that team comes back with a marketer, then you give them another bullshit. Yeah. So the first one was just a distraction.
Exactly.
That's even worse.
Yes. And for us, it's very objective, right? It's like, this is the incremental ROAS we need to see. This is the target. Please achieve this. By the way, if you achieve this, and even if you don't take our financing, it's a great outcome for you.
And there's like written things that you have in your report. There's the graphs, and you're like, hey, it looks like X, Y, and Z is happening here, so you might want to focus on these type of values. So it was really useful for that.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm really, that's, I mean, it obviously feels great to hear that it was helpful.
It was a positive no. Well, let's end up on a positive. I mean, everything was positive. Joe, it's a pleasure talking to you. I think you have a super inspirational story.
Yeah,
I like entrepreneurs.
I love chatting with you.
I want to see you go through tough times and come on top.
I've been through a lot of tough times. But, you know, like, yeah, I mean, you only sort of, those are the gems, right? Like, you, like every difficult thing, you know, what I was having a chat the other day, and a guy who's like, you know, tried to do something, didn't work. And he's like, oh, I think I'm going to go back to consulting. And I was like, why? Like, because you just fucking gave up 4 years of your life and you got this gem.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to just throw it away and go back to consulting. Like, now you have the gem.
Yeah.
Then now is exactly when you should do the next one.
Yeah.
You know, like, use the gem. You know, it's like paying $500,000 for an MBA and then not using it. Yeah.
Vulnerability and intense effort.
Yeah.
That's the powerful combo.
Yeah.
Can I end on that?
Yeah. Cool.
Joe, pleasure. How can companies reach out to you for that sick due diligence that you do for their product?
Yeah. So they can just send me an email, I guess, joe@pvxpartners.com. I'm reachable on LinkedIn.
All right.
And,
link.
Or they can talk to you. And
link in the description. If they can type your surname into the LinkedIn, they get a bonus.
I think if you just search Joe W, I'm pretty sure I show up. Or just Joe PVX. I think it shows
joking. There's a link in the description. So thank you, Joe.
Thanks, man.
And thanks everybody for listening wherever the cameras are.
Yeah.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructorofun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.